I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's been great. It's really exciting to get on here and kind of talk about a few things that we're going to talk about today. I
Yeah.
know from my own experience and the content that I do, it does revolve around maybe not as heavily as something like this podcast, but we definitely have themes around mental health that are really important, I feel like, and especially in kind of today's world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you were like, when I was going through, when I started this podcast, I was making notes of who I'd like to come on. And we've always interacted like through Twitter and things like that, but we've never actually spoken. But I've always seen you've always been very strongly like voiced and opinionated on like mental health and being very open. And
Absolutely, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you're doing some awesome content. So for those that don't know,
Thank you.
who are you? What are you doing? What kind of
So
content are you
yeah, my
making?
name's Tommy Beans. I'm a variety content creator, primarily on Twitch, but I post pretty much every day on the other socials. TikTok, YouTube are my two main ones. I yap for England on Twitter, and yeah, a lot of my content revolves around playthroughs. I did used to primarily be more of an FPS based streamer, but although Marvel Rivals does have my heart at the moment, and
Still never played that.
I do like group content. I'm a group main. Shout out to all my group mains. But primarily, I do love doing playthroughs and stuff like that, and we kind of have a little bit of fun with it.
Nice. I've seen Marvel. I don't get time to game anymore, really, apart from like the occasional bit of
Mhm.
like Minecraft or Warzone with my boys. But Marvel Rivals looks so good. All I've heard from it is
It
Groot
really
is
is.
sweaty as fuck.
Yeah. And it's weird because when I went into so I used to play a lot of Overwatch, and obviously there's a
Mm,
lot of similarities between the two. But what
yeah.
I found was the thing that I liked most about Marvel Rivals was even if you're not doing very well, you still feel impactful.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that these games kind of need to focus on a little bit more is making people feel impactful when they play them, or at least
Yeah.
like they have some level of role that they're providing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because I feel like there's so many games where like I've never been like the best game. I feel like I hold my
Hmm.
own pretty well, but sometimes like when I
Hmm.
play Valorant, I tried doing Valorant and I'm just my teammates are just doing everything and I just feel like I'm doing it like contributing nothing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
And that's
too
the really
sweaty for
nice
me.
thing about Marvel Rivals is that impactful element. If you're a support player, you can turn fights on your own. If you're a DPS player, you can turn fights on your own. Same with
Hmm.
tank players, you can just really turn fights. Everybody can do it, and
Yeah.
I think that adds something to the hero shooter genre that Overwatch kind of missed the mark on.
Mm.
Is sure you can land these big ultimates or these big players, but realistically, they're kind of a bit fewer and far between.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you. What's like the Marvel Rivals community like? Because I know a lot of like communities like Valorant and Apex and Call of Duty, especially, can be like so toxic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there definitely is that toxic element in there. And this was a piece that I actually spoke about on stream was I feel like Marvel Rivals is kind of the next generation's Modern Warfare 2 for talking
Oh
sake,
my
where we had
god.
those super sweaty lobbies where it was unfiltered communications. I'm sorry everyone knows what I'm talking about when I mention Modern Warfare 2 lobbies.
Hmm.
But I personally feel like Marvel Rivals, because it's new and because it's settled in, I feel like that's kind of the next generations. I see a lot of words that I don't know the meaning of, and I'm having to Google them, and I kind of
Yeah.
show my age a little bit there, but I feel like there's definitely a lot more of that in there.
Yeah. Yeah, you know you're getting old when you're getting called things in a game and you don't know what it means.
Yeah, it happens all the time now, and it really doesn't make me feel any better
No.
about getting close to 30. So,
No, dude. Oh man, I turned 30 last week.
oh, did you? First and
Yeah.
foremost, early happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was woke up on the day of my birthday. I was looking in the mirror, like trimming my beard, and I was like, I saw like just grey hairs coming out here. I was like, oh my god, it's happening. It's happening. I was like,
Oh my god,
oh
I love that.
man. Yeah. How long you been streaming for?
So I've been streaming for the best part of 4 years. I
Okay.
think it was 4 years in January just gone. It kind of started out as a hobby, really, and it really has been a hobby for the majority of that time. Kind of like as we mentioned previously, I started in the Sea of Thieves community. I did about 2 years doing exclusively Sea of Thieves content, but
Mhm.
I was never worried about posting anywhere or the numbers or interacting with people and kind of really growing it. It was just a place for people to watch me enjoy myself,
Yeah.
essentially. We entered a couple tournaments. We went on Sea of Thieves TV, which is like the official
Oh,
channel,
nice.
did some like charity stuff with them. And then that's when it really started to pick up the pace a little bit.
Mhm.
I kind of lost enjoyment for Sea of Thieves. I became a Hunt Showdown creator for the best part of about 9 months to a year. Really kind of delved into that. Similar story. It was very much a hobby thing. I enjoyed it, but there reached a point where it felt pressured to play it. And it
Mhm.
kind of felt like if you did something else, you weren't really doing the right thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I found for a lot of my content creation journey over the past kind of like first 3 years or so. It really felt like I was chained to one specific thing. And any content outside of that, viewership numbers, although it shouldn't define as a streamer's, it often feels like it does at times. And to see
Yeah.
those be absolutely slashed from what I'm used to because I'm doing something different, something that I enjoy or something that's just come out, it really does kind of put that dampener on you. And that's when I transitioned more into variety style stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of changed up my content in a way that made it less about the game I was playing and rather that I was playing a game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Your
the onus was
personality was
more on
the
me as a
yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And when people watch you for you rather than watch you because you're playing something, not only is there such a shift in the community, but there's also such a shift in the content that you make, the
Mhm.
kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Reception it gets.
Yeah.
And it's because people are there for you rather than just what you're doing.
Yeah. I think that really when I streamed, that was one of the most beautiful things about when I streamed was like I started in Call of Duty, just started Warzone and multiplayer, and yeah, for the best part of 18 months it was that. And then when I slowly started to transition into Minecraft and playing single player games and random games, then when you find that community is kind of following you through all these games, and even I used to stream FIFA sometimes, and I know like
Yeah, yeah.
most of my community would just have no interest in football, and yeah, maybe they wouldn't be that like as involved in the game, but they would still be there supporting like because for
Yeah,
you, and that
absolutely.
is
Yeah.
just something so nice about that. And I feel like it's a shift in your mindset as well when you know you're not chained down to just one game or one specific genre. Do you feel like there's more like a freedom there to actually fully just be yourself?
Yeah, because I think that oftentimes the games that you play have an element of reflection on who you are as a person. For example, I love chaotic, silly co-op plays, where you're scrabbling through a difficult obstacle course with a mate and you're all just kind of shouting at each other, but like in a fun
Yeah,
way. And it all gets a little bit chaotic. And I thrive in those kind of situations because that's where you can get a lot of really good content pieces.
yeah,
But there are other times when, and I use Sea of Thieves as an example quite a lot, where Sea of Thieves as a game has a lot of downtime within it.
right.
So a lot of the streamers that tend to do well in Sea of Thieves are very good, like casual conversations. And maybe if you're collaborating with new people for the first time and you don't have that same kind of rapport, oftentimes it can be difficult for you to, at least for me, to materialize that because I think I, as a person, need something a little more faster paced.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose when it's kind of very slower pace, it's can be a bit hard to like break the ice. Whereas like if you've just got chaos, it is just someone's cracking jokes or something funny's happening. Like
Yeah,
that's the kind of content I personally love. Like when I was making gaming content, it was like Lethal Company and like these
yeah,
indie games where it is just funny moment after funny moment, and you're just you and your mates are just bouncing off each other, and that's just
yeah.
the
And
best
I
in my
think
opinion.
there's a kind of magic in those kind of games, I feel
Yeah.
like. Because everybody that plays it can experience something like that. And I think like I said, there's that little bit of magic in there. Whenever we talk about games that are a little bit slower paced, and this is obviously no disrespect to the people that content
No.
create for slower paced games. But for me personally, those types of titles are a little bit more difficult to kind of feel the same magic with,
Hmm.
because it's more of like a talk show kind of situation than
Yeah.
anything else. So
Yeah, I suppose it'll. I mean, there's going to be an audience for all of it,
oh,
isn't there? But it's
absolutely, there's an
just
audience for
about,
everything. Yeah,
again, it comes down to personality types and
yeah,
what you enjoy really. But
yeah.
how have you found like through streaming? Have you had any kind of like difficulties when it comes to like your mental health? I know like when I was doing
Oh,
it, I
absolutely.
would pile so much pressure on myself to stream. Like how have you kind of gone through that and dealt with
I
that?
think, and this is kind of the double-edged sword situation with being kind of a bit more of a higher energy content creator, is once I have all the energy done from my 9 to 5, once I then do that for an evening stream, as soon as the end timer hits, I'm wiped out.
Yeah.
And I think I found that I was kind of just burning it out a little bit too much. You know, burnout is a very common thing. It's a very real thing as well. And I've I've had very many cases of burnout throughout my
Yeah.
streaming career. One thing that I did implement though fairly recently, which I found has had a lot of success, is kind of taking the last maybe half an hour to an hour to do something a little bit less impactful, kind of
Mhm.
wind down for the evening, that type of thing. And one
Nice.
of the things we do is we do a jigsaw. But what we do is chat can just join in the link, and we can all grab pieces and put them in together.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it's a very collaborative thing. And we've had like 6, 7 people just turning up just for the jigsaw section.
That's
And
wicked.
yeah, it's really nice. It's really
Uh,
nice.
yeah, there's something very wholesome about that, and like you say, it's just having that downtime to wind and kind of. It's almost like they say before you go to bed, make yourself like a cup of sleep tea and turn the TV
Yeah.
off and like read or something like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I do. I normally just take like a 5-minute break. I literally do drink sleep tea on a night. It was great that you mentioned that. And then like we changed the playlist up to be a little bit, more relaxing. I know a lot of my audience, for example, are UK based, so they're in a very similar situation to where I am, where they need to start winding down for the evening.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like my sleep has always been a big issue for me because of the energy and stuff. I find it quite difficult to turn off sometimes.
Hmm.
And doing this kind of method where we're actively taking time to wind down, to get ready for bed, to ease the stresses and tensions of the day really has helped in that. And it
Hmm.
probably been more impactful than I expected, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really nice, almost like a discipline, I suppose, of
Yeah.
just. So I always struggle with if I'm having a good stream and then I'm like, I don't want to end. I'm just going to keep going. And then I'm just going to
Yeah.
keep going because, like, again, you find yourself getting into this point of, oh, I never focused on numbers and because viewership would always be turned off, so I'd never know how many people are there. But
Absolutely.
if
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
chat's flowing and having a good time, I'm always like, I felt this pressure and this like I don't know, yeah, just this weight on me to keep going, to keep supplying other people's happiness and enjoyment. And then I was like you said, the same as you, I would turn the stream off. I'm like, gone. I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, or
Yeah.
or the
And I
opposite of
think,
you're on an absolute buzz and then you're wide awake for hours
yeah,
because you
yeah.
haven't taken that time to wind down.
It's a real difficult balance to get right.
Mm,
And I think a lot of what I do to kind of counteract that, I think, is remember that we post on other platforms. And,
yeah.
we post on other platforms a lot. It's oftentimes the main draw that brings people into content that you're creating on platforms like Twitch and YouTube. But using that as a point of saying, look, if you want a little bit more of what I'm doing, signposting where they are. If people then want to go across and check out other channels when you're not actively live,
Hmm.
that's great. It's a win-win for both sides,
Yeah.
and kind of to come back onto the point of that winding down and finding the discipline to do that. I think it's very, very good to kind of give yourself a little bit of grace, to be able to
Mm,
change up such a schedule and such a shift in energy can be quite difficult. But I think the best thing that I have found that works for me is bridging the gap between the two. For example, going from streaming to, you know, reading in bed, for example, is quite a big shift.
Yeah.
But by bridging the gap and saying, okay, well, I'll stay live, but I'll do something lesser energetic, it makes that transition into it a little bit easier. And
Yeah.
I've also found that I definitely a lot more relaxed on my off stream days as well, and I can just slip into that rhythm a lot easier.
That's really good advice. Actually, I've not really ever heard any streamer or creator really talk about bridging that gap before, and it
Yeah,
is so important because
yeah,
otherwise,
and
your whole life just blends into one mess of like.
yeah. And I think that what happens a lot of the time is, and I kind of use this with sports as well. I did used to do a lot of running, is that you can't just wake up one day and run 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, whatever it may be. You train up to it. You kind of transition to that point.
Yeah.
Now, that's something that you can do with pretty much everything in life, really. Whether that's relationships, whether that's friendships, you can build up and build down to things quite easily. It's just about taking those small steps to do it, small, very um, relevant and needed steps to just kind of work your way towards that. Originally, it started out of I'll just take 5 minutes and make a brew, like a sleepy tea to kind of wind myself down. But I was still playing high impact games, and something didn't quite feel right there. It felt very mismatched.
Yeah.
So I kind of said, "Oh, let's bring it down a little bit further. Let's do something more low key." And originally, it was a just chatting segment, but just chatting didn't really work out because I was tired and I wanted to go to bed. We need something to
Yeah.
do to kind of bring that up, and then it's just about finding that right balance.
Yeah, I suppose, and it's just finding what works for you as well. Like what
Yeah,
works for you might not work for someone else, and vice versa. And it, like I said,
absolutely. Yeah.
trying something doesn't work. I'll try something else and
Yeah,
finding that
and that's
balance.
another thing as well is you will never know unless you don't try it.
Hmm.
You have to try something to know whether it works for you or not. And oftentimes I see a lot of creators try something, it not work, and then them just scrumple it up and throw it in the bin. You
Yeah,
know, there is an element of learning. We're all learning, we're all human beings, right? But having the time to learn and say, okay, this part I do like, this part I don't like. Let's change the bits we don't like and kind of make something better and kind of evolve it rather than just this didn't work, I'm throwing it in the bin.
yeah. I suppose it's kind of like you have got to have patience with things as well when it comes to content. It's like watering a plant for a day. I think, oh, why is it not growing? Throw it, getting
Yeah.
rid of it. Like you have to like give it time, like let it
Yeah.
brew. Like, but
Absolutely, I agree.
yeah, I think there is. I don't, I've been out the game so long. When I say like when it comes to streaming, I think my last stream was April 2024, and that was like a one-off
Okay.
stream. So maybe
Yeah.
18 months. I think I've been out streaming. Um,
Hmm.
when I was there, I kind of felt like the online scene of like mental health wasn't very strong. In a way, or not strong, but I feel like it wasn't spoken about a lot.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
do you think that that is kind of still the case in streaming, or do you think it's becoming more apparent that we are talking about it more? And
I think that it's becoming more apparent that we're talking about it from a creator to creator perspective. For example, if one of my friends who I'm supposed to be collaborating with says, you know what, I'm just having a really bad mental health day. Do you mind if we reschedule this to another time? Absolutely. I feel there's that understanding there.
mhm,
But when it comes to kind of creators to viewers, a lot of times I think there's a little bit of mismatch there. Obviously, viewers themselves have a lot of wide range, different approaches to things, different opinions, different viewpoints.
mhm,
And it's quite difficult to convey what you're trying to say and the advice you're trying to give when some people say, oh, well, that didn't work for me, and kind of once again crumple it up and dismiss it. Whereas I think it's really important to open a lot of conversational doors, which I think is what's happening more at the moment, is it's becoming less and less of a taboo subject, which
yeah,
I think is really important. But having those open doors and saying to people, look, you know, like I was very open when I went back onto SSRI medication. That was something I was very clear and open about to my community. I said, look, I might
what's
be a little bit off.
what's
So
SSRI?
SSRIs are antidepressants.
Right.
So it's antidepressant medication. The ones that I take. are kind of anti-anxiety inducing as well, kind of a mix of the two, but
Mhm.
primarily it's the depression side for me.
Yeah.
And I was really open about that because I know that probably a good amount of my community take some level of medication. And although there is that common ground there, before there was that element of taboo to talk about it. But
Mhm.
now we've got people who are saying, oh, really excited because I, finally got a diagnosis for this or finally got something for that. And those are things that should be celebrated and
Yeah.
not kind of kept to yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, especially maybe 5, 6, maybe even 10, like 10 years ago, people would get like a diagnosis for something, and then you would kind of, like you say, you would keep it to yourself. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't want to be labeled as ADHD or autistic or depressed or
Yeah.
whatever. Whereas
Yeah.
now, I mean, you could go say as far as to say people are over-diagnosing themselves these days, or
Yeah.
with self-diagnosis and that. But you're 100% right. I'm seeing people, um, like posting, people that are going through like years and years trying to get diagnosed with something, trying to figure out what's going on. And you're right, those moments should be celebrated. And for people, streamers coming out and talking about it is so impactful. I think
Yeah.
I'm seeing more, like, I'm still in the scene of seeing on Twitter of people, streamers posting out, not feeling it tonight, really like having a down day, taking the night off. I'm sorry, which they shouldn't have to apologize, but I feel like
Yeah.
it's just a thing we do, I suppose. But I
Yeah.
am
Of
seeing
course.
more and more people being understanding of that and be like, yep, take the time you need, rest up, like come back whenever you're ready, which is nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's also a good showing of the streamer themselves. I
Mm,
think a lot of times, as we kind of touched on previously, some of the communities around some of the games can get a little bit toxic. And if you're a big creator in that kind of space, sometimes people can get a little bit mad and a little bit keyboard warrior and all that type of
yeah.
stuff. But I think when you build a community that is open and honest, having those conversations and saying, look, I'm not just dodging because I don't feel like it today. I'm dodging because this is a reason. People
Yeah.
are far more understanding than just, oh, I'm not feeling it today. It can
Yeah.
kind of have a little bit of a different connotation.
Mhm.
And oftentimes when people understand that, the amount of times I've cancelled something, said, look, I'm just not in a great headspace today or whatever it may be. And suddenly I get, a few people DMing me and reaching out privately and saying, okay, how can we work through this? Like, is there anything I can help with?
Mhm.
It's a real testament of how the mindset around it is changing.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think, especially, I mean, just going from my own personal experience, like when I was a couple of years ago, basically, when I stopped streaming, I was working like 13-hour days, like 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. And just, I physically
Yeah.
didn't have the time to go live. And my mental did tank a lot. I haven't taken any medication. I've never, I've done a bit of therapy, but I've never
Okay.
gone to medication. Not because I
Hmm.
don't want to or anything. I just haven't. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Um, but I did feel like when I was kind of taking more of a backseat on streaming and it was getting less and less frequent to then none, I did find it hard that at that time, a lot of people that I think I was averaging about 25 viewers at the time. So I was doing really well
Hmm.
and it was going good. And then I did find that as soon as I took a step back, less and less people were talking to me. And then I became less and less popular, quote unquote,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I there was less for me to be able to give other people, and then I was like,
Yeah.
fuck, it's really whittled down who my actual friends are. And like I
Yeah.
said, there was still like I had like the core like 5 or 6 people that were constantly reaching out and being absolute like godsends to me
Yeah. Yeah.
through the whole thing. But it was like a real eye opening, like, oh fuck, like
Yeah, and I think this is something that a lot of content creators kind of need to take into account is how their communities are shaped around and what they're shaped around.
mhm,
Obviously, the bit that I mentioned before about the content that I made and that shift in it being more about my personality rather than the game I was playing. You also get that in a lot of communities who do a lot of giveaways or communities that do a lot more like erotic content and stuff like that.
mhm,
Oftentimes it shifts why people are there. And
Yeah.
when you find in these kind of more serious situations where things aren't going as well as you'd like them to, whether that's mentally, physically, or whatever it may be, you find that the people who are there for ulterior reasons, that's when they start to dissipate. And a really good
Yeah.
example of that, and that I've seen quite recently on Twitter, is, and this happens primarily with female streamers, is when they mention they have a partner or have gotten married
Yeah.
or have gotten engaged, and then suddenly they find their follower count just tanks.
It's
And
awful.
that's a prime example of it.
It's hot. Like, it's just, I never understood the concept of thinking like because a streamer is single or taken, why are you there then? Are
Yeah.
are you there
Yeah.
because you think you have a chance with this? But like,
Yeah.
trust me, but anyone listening, that streamer is not interested romantically in you. Like,
Yeah.
it,
It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy to me. You know, I have a lot of female friends in the content creator space. A lot of my very close friends are female, and the amount of times people who want to kind of spin a narrative, try and do those types of things, and it's just ridiculous.
yeah, it's not nice, but unfortunately, it is one of those. I don't want to say it is one of those things because I want there to be change in it, and I'm
Yeah.
not. I don't want to accept it, but it's unfortunately is it comes with streaming. It's one of the difficulties of streaming, and
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
but I was moving on away from streaming. I wanted to, obviously we've just had Men's Mental Health Week just gone. We have Men's Mental Health Month in November. I wanted to talk more about like the stigma of men's mental health
Mhm.
and where you think that is in society at the moment.
I think a lot of that is to do with a lot of the loneliness side of things, and I feel like over the probably since COVID and onwards, there really has been a little bit of a movement in kind of like how social we are as general human beings. You know, a lot of times we communicate online now, and whenever you miss that social in-person interaction, you know, whether it's through a face cam like we're doing today, or even if it's just seeing the person face to face, getting to understand where their personality sits, how they're feeling, just off body language alone. You know, as you can probably tell, I'm a very animated person. I move my hands around quite a lot.
Mm,
But to just hear that over voice, over like a VC in Discord, or if we're just having a phone call, it doesn't relay the same kind of message.
mhm.
And I think that's what happens is when you move it to an internet space, you'll find, and it was kind of like quite a nice segue from what we're talking about previously, where people have ulterior motives sometimes for being friends with people in an online space. And oftentimes we find that from my general experience is that there is a feeling that men have less to offer in this kind
Mm,
of space.
right.
And although I don't agree with that, I think that, you know, we all have an equal amounts to offer. I think that kind of this over sexualization of women has led it to be a little bit of an imbalance, and for men to feel like they can't do as well as other people when absolutely they can. They just have to portray themselves in a completely different way.
Yeah, I suppose it goes. It's been like a forever thing where a man's value equates to providing and
Yeah.
protecting. So if you're not providing, you're not protecting, you're not enough. And I
Yeah.
think that
And I
stems
think
down from our
that's,
families. Sorry.
yeah, no, I was going to say kind of onto the providing and protecting point. How do you do that online?
Mm,
You know, I think
yeah.
that's something that we really have to consider, because online we can all type the same messages that says, you know, this is wrong, stand up for this and do that. But it's very not non-traditional, I guess is a good
Hmm.
way of putting that.
Yeah.
Um, but I do kind of agree with the point that you were going to mention about from families as well. To kind of come back to that, my family has always been, well, we've always had quite a strong female lead in the family. You know,
Okay.
my grandmother, before she passed, she was a very strong female lead and was kind of the heart of the family. And then when she passed, like, my mum really took the reins with a lot of stuff, and she's kind of like the heartbeat of it all now.
Hmm.
Whereas the men in the family have been a lot more kind of like the backbone in supporting them rather than going out and being the breadwinner and this and that. So I've always had a very kind of admiration of strong women, and especially strong women in the workplace and strong women in content creation and things like that, because I feel like they're really making a difference and making a change.
Yeah.
I don't know how that relates to your family at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, my family, it's like on my dad's side. I really hope my parents aren't listening to this. My dad's side, it was just so calm. There was never any arguments with my grandparents. My granddad was so stoic and just this like aura of knowledge and calmness, and like would never say boo to a goose. Like he loved everyone and anything from any race, color, like sexuality, like didn't matter. And then so that's kind of transcended down to my dad, is how my dad has always been, but they never really spoke about feelings, surprising. Like it was just, you cracked on, you kind of, but it was never like in a overtly toxic, like, come on, like man up. It was just, it just wasn't spoken about. And then on my mum's side, we've got, between her and her brothers, we've got autism, ADHD. Like my nan used to work with children with special needs, and but it was a lot more aggression and chaos, I think, going on in that family. And I think that it's weird how my mum and my dad work so well together, because I feel like my mum's chaos and my dad's like calmness, they seem to balance each other out. But it's almost like with my mum being the normal one in her side of the family, she, I feel like, maybe shut off a lot of her emotions, because any kind of process of emotions for her would result in anger or frustration from her parents, which I've always found super ironic, seeing as my nan works with special needs children and has incredible patience and learning, and she's a phenomenal teacher, but maybe didn't quite give the same treatment to her kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know too much into, I'm not going to speak for my mum, but I feel like she kind of, my household, we never really spoke about feelings too much.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've always struggled with intimacy in that I don't really know how to process it. I kind of, because I never really saw my parents huggy, kissy, kind of lovey. I knew they loved each other. I knew they are happy together. They would always show each other's love in different ways. And that's kind of where I've come onto it, where I'm like, okay, well, I've only really started talking about my feelings and emotions the last 5 years, because of, I've not seen it. I've not had that, like, how are you? How are you actually doing? Like, I've never been sat down and asked how I am. And I feel like a lot of men don't really get asked that. A lot of men don't get, like, how are you really feeling? How are you really doing? I think,
no,
I
think that's a really, really good point, is because I feel a very similar way. The way that my house growing up was structured was a little bit different. So I have a sister, but my sister has a different dad to me. So she was kind of brought into the household. I'm the younger, so she was older than me, and she had nothing but anger inside of her.
Oh, wow.
Everything was rage. My sister and my mom would argue and fight all the time over absolutely everything. And what it meant was, it kind of meant that there was no time. It almost felt like there was no time for you as an individual. And what that meant was, you kind of grow up in this world where you just kind of manage things yourself. You become a lot more individual. And I guess individual is probably a nice way of putting it, but kind of closed up in some kind of way.
You kind of close yourself off to just get on with it, because the resources is being taken up elsewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that something that I found a lot from my dad's side was this kind of repurposing of emotions. You know, if you feel really angry, if you feel really stressed, if you feel frustration, pedal that into something that's going to bring good rather than bring disdain. You know, for example, you could get really, really angry and try and punch a hole in the wall, for example, which is a very, you know, is quite a common way of dealing with those kind of things, is these kind of lashing out. But a lot of my growing up, and especially kind of in my teens, was take that anger and go and get a PR and a deadlift, or run as fast as you can, or
Yeah.
do something that's gonna eliminate that in more of a physically beneficial way.
Yeah, 100%. And it's actually really interesting you say that, because I had a very similar upbringing. In my brother's 5 years older than me.
Mhm.
Um, Full on ADHD, like the epitome of like ADHD, or what ADHD was considered 10, 15 years ago, of no attention, anger, frustration,
Mhm.
kind of like lashing out. And that would cause chaos in my house all the time. So it was always tantrums, or like throwing like, and as I look back, it was just he didn't know how to regulate his feelings, or
Yeah.
him or his emotions. But same as you, all of my parents' resources was taken up on looking after him. And
Yeah.
Will's okay. He's quiet. He's in his room. He's playing video games. He's on his Xbox. He's laughing. Like, we don't need to worry about him. I've had
Mhm.
this conversation with my parents since getting older, and they're like, we had no idea. We had no idea you were
Yeah.
struggling, because you
Yeah.
were just always in your room, just happy, laughing, obviously playing Xbox 360, like just
Yeah.
never really went out, didn't go out too much, so they didn't have to worry about me getting into trouble. And it was just, yeah. And then,
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people, kind of content creators and people who kind of watch content creators, probably have quite a similar backstory, quite a similar situation, because they found an escapism almost through
yeah,
gaming, obviously meeting similar minded people who are trying to escape the same kind of situations. And I didn't have a poor upbringing by any stretch of the
no,
imagination,
me
but
neither.
it was a something different.
Hmm.
And different isn't always a bad thing. And sometimes you find the way that works for you.
Hmm.
And for me, and as it sounds like for yourself and for a lot of content creators and viewers out there, is having that place to go to that's a Minecraft server where you can just
Yeah.
kind of let free. If you want to let out a little bit of rage, you blow up a house with TNT, or you go and slay some monsters on Monster Hunter, or you go and get in a COD lobby and kind of
Hmm.
see if you can get a nuke or whatever it may be. There's so many avenues that you can go down through the gaming space, and I think it's been very
Yeah,
good recently as well at processing those emotions.
definitely. I do think that kind of is the ground zero for most creators or gamers, is escapism. And
Yes.
I stayed in and played video games because at 13, 14, 15, my friends are going out, getting drunk, smoking weed. And I was just like, yeah, I would go to like house parties and things like that, but I had no
Yeah.
interest in drugs. I didn't have any
Hmm.
interest in loitering around the park at night. That just wasn't me. I wanted to stay and
Hmm.
see how far I could get in COD Zombies. Like, that was just that was my thing. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, I think that is a beauty of content. Going back to content briefly, is that, like you said, having a Minecraft server for a community. Like, oh, we had a community Minecraft server a few years ago, and dude, it was like the ultimate time of my life, that we would just have 10 people in a VC every night, and everyone is just,
Yeah.
any frustrations or anger or like real life shit you had going on, you could just forget about it for a few hours.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just, yeah. I think more so now, I'm trying to find a balance to not game too much.
Hmm.
Well, maybe I was gaming too much at 3, 4 in the morning, and that would get bad. But now I'm like, I don't have time for any of it. I'm like, fuck, I really just want to sit there and play Minecraft with some friends. Like,
Yeah, and I think a good kind of mention on that is it's all about balance, to a sense that if you're staying up and playing, till 3, 4 in the morning, it's not necessarily that that's a bad thing. It's the after effects of,
mm,
you're probably not sleeping too great. If you've been eating snacks at 1 in the morning, your body might be a bit irregulated with food, drink, that type of stuff.
yeah,
It's very, very similar to people who go out clubbing and stuff like that. It's coming home early, getting that dodgy kebab at 3 in the morning. That's what
yeah, it's
can
the extra
irregulate your
things.
body a lot of times. It's the things outside of that.
Yeah,
And that can almost have a bigger impact than the thing you're actually doing a lot of the
yeah,
times.
100%. And I also found that, sometimes like it's great if you're doing it on like if you work on Monday to Friday and you're doing it on like Friday night, Saturday nights, like great. It's just the same as people go out for a few drinks after work on a Friday. It's when it's
Absolutely.
on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, and you find yourself doing it every night.
Yeah.
That's when it can become a really bad habit. I also find that sometimes when I was doing that, I wasn't actually tackling my issues. I was kind of avoiding my problems
Yeah.
that I need to deal with. I was like, oh, I can just play Minecraft for 6 hours. I haven't got to think about this anxiety or this depression or
Mhm.
like, and it was rather than actually, okay, I need to sit down. I'm going to journal. I'm going to write my issues out. I'm going to look into therapy and actually, like you said, it all comes back to the balance of, okay, I'm going to
Yeah,
have a
absolutely.
bit of this, but also I'm going to work on myself as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of that kind of it boils down to kind of, as I mentioned before, like moving those feelings and regulating them in a different way. You know, we're often quite distracted and using that as a mechanism to say, okay, I don't need to deal with these feelings now because I can play Minecraft for the next 6 hours, or I don't need to deal with these feelings now because it gives you an excuse.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the excuses can cause some of the problems as well because they're not being regulated in the same way.
Yeah.
Now, kind of to come on to another point there is that if we're not dealing with our emotions in the right way, you know, that can cause a lot of issues too. I've had falling outs with friends because I've been poor at regulating emotions with them,
Yeah.
you know, poor at communicating things because I've just said, oh, instead of having a difficult discussion or having a conversation that needs to happen or doing, for some people, general hygiene or good food intake or getting good sleep. Instead of dealing with that issue, you're
Mhm.
distracting yourself and saying, oh, but my Terraria server needs me. No, the Terraria server will still be there in the morning. But
Yeah, I reflect back from the time that I was kind of coming out of streaming, and as I briefly mentioned about the people that I thought like, oh, so and so's not reached out to me, and like find myself getting into a really toxic mindset of like, oh, well, this person hasn't reached out to me, they don't care about me. Like, do you know what I mean?
yeah.
I got really that, and like I said, because I wasn't regulating my emotions correctly or properly,
Hmm.
or like actually challenging them, I was kind of pushing the blame out when I realized like if I just took it upon myself and held myself accountable to have a tough conversation, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna figure it out. And then
Oh, for sure.
you like I
Yeah.
said, there's friendships like I recently in the last few months I've been going back and like actually reaching out to someone or a few people. I'm like, I'm sorry if I acted a certain way to you like 18 months ago, whether they
Hmm.
even care or not.
Yeah.
Just like if my actions made you feel a certain way, like I am sorry for that, and
Yeah.
kind of making a conscious effort to grow and to just be a better person.
Yeah, and I think a really good point of that as well is being the person that makes the first interaction, that makes the first, I don't want to say move because that sounds a bit too romanticizing, but being the
To
person that
reach
kind of
out.
is the first to reach out. A lot of times, and especially in this kind of day and age, is, you know, how many times people say, "Oh, so and so ghosted me," or "So and so left me on
Mm-hmm.
red." There's not an issue there to say, okay, they've not responded to my messages. I'm just going to say, oh, hey, you know, I don't know if anything's up at the moment, if you wanted to chat or whatever it may be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just extending out that branch. And if they turn that down again, then you've kind of done everything that you can do.
Yeah.
You've left the onus on them to do something, and that's completely okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a reflection of you if they haven't replied. It's I'm trying to
Hmm.
give everyone grace now, where I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, like you said, they ghosted me. Oh, they didn't reply to my message. Maybe they've got something going on. Maybe they're
Hmm.
busy. Maybe they're not on Discord at the moment. Like I'm really
Hmm.
just trying to not saying, oh, they clearly don't want to talk to me or they clearly are just like they hate me or whatever. Like, no, like you said, you've put it out there, the onus is on them, and I'm content with where I am and what I've done to
Yeah.
that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that boils down to kind of having empathy and compassion for other people as well.
Yeah.
Is a lot of times I would message people and see that they were gaming with somebody else. And I thought, oh, well, they're clearly online. Why are they not responding to me? Well, they're obviously doing something else.
Yeah.
And in a world where it's very easy for us to just put "do not disturb" at the top of the top of our screens, or appear offline if you don't want to talk to someone or have an interaction, those are, it kind of goes back to the point of it acts as a distraction to the problem rather than dealing with it. I know that that's obviously quite a broad stretch, but I think it's something that people kind of need to be a little bit more mindful of.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, it is easy to get yourself into that mindset of thinking, oh, everything's kind of out of spite or out of negativity. And I think especially in the content world, because I feel where everyone, you've got so many relationships going on constantly. And I felt
Yeah.
like that's one thing I always struggle with was I get my energy from being alone. I also
Hmm.
love being around people. So
Hmm.
I struggle with the Discord day to day of good morning to 15, 20
Yeah.
different people
It's
every day. How are you? Yeah, work. Yep, on lunch break. Yeah, like I couldn't do it. My brain was just
yeah.
overwhelming. And it comes back to way back at the beginning we said about the boundaries and looking after yourself in content and in streaming.
Oh,
And
for sure.
it became because I found such a pressure on it to do it, and I was neglecting how it was actually making me feel.
Yeah, and I think a really good example of that is where we have those friends, and you can all think of one or two friends when I say this piece. We all have those one or two friends who we do not speak to for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe even a month or two. But as soon as you guys get together or somebody messages the other person, it's like you've been
Yeah.
speaking every single day.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I feel like I am that friend
Yeah.
to a lot of people, and it does make me sad because I feel like I've always wanted this group of friends that were just constantly just banter, 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 like it's just
Yeah.
all going on, and I'm like, and I see it like when you stop streaming, I'm like, I don't know if you remember that meme of like Squidward watching SpongeBob and Patrick playing outside the
Yeah.
window, and I feel like it's just me just there seeing everyone play, and I'm like, that's okay though, because if people want to play, like you'll see, like you just join our Discord. We have that. We literally have that friendship group of we don't really talk every day. Like the chit
Mhm.
chat's pretty dead, but then
Yeah.
in the gaming section, it'll be like Among Us tonight? Question mark, and then everyone just jumps on, and it's
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
said, nothing's changed. Like we're all just vibing.
yeah. And I think there needs to be more of an appreciation for that.
Yeah.
One of my really close streaming friends, she's called a Plot Twist. She's a VTuber, and we can go 2, 3 weeks without talking to each other, and then something will happen, and or I could put a tweet out saying, maybe I'm not feeling too great mentally, or you know, she could do a similar thing, and she will be the first person to message me
Yeah.
straight away, because there's just a connection and a rapport that kind of goes past messaging each other all the time.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes that to me is far more genuine than
Yeah.
someone very routinely checking up on me every day.
Hmm.
I think there's an element of there's a it's kind of a time and a place for things.
Hmm.
And I feel like for my communication style, and obviously this varies from people person to person, is I don't need to be checked up on all the time, but I will tell people when I'm not doing so great. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of times the people who do often check up on a lot of people a lot of the times are sometimes the ones that are doing that because they need that themselves. And often it's portraying what you need to others is a lot more of a reflection on yourself.
Yeah. I like that. That's really, really good point. I think there is I think there's a value in that kind of friendship of, like you
Yes.
said, you don't speak for weeks and weeks and weeks, but if they notice something's up, they're the first person there. Like
Hmm.
you can count on them no matter what kind of friends of,
Yeah.
if you need them, you phone them, they're going to answer.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes to kind of move on a little bit, I think it comes to kind of compliments as well. I find that a lot of people in the space are very quick to say, "Oh, good job, this is great, this is cool, this is good." But if every single thing is great and cool and good, there's no kind of constructive criticism in that. There's no evolution and growth, and that's really what the true friends want to see.
Yeah.
I've often kind of lived my life by giving out lesser but more genuine compliments, and I feel like the compliments that I do give out to people not only are very well deserved, but they hold a little bit more gravitas than just, "Oh, you look really nice," in every single picture that you ever post.
Yeah.
If you post 3 times a day and it's just, "Oh, you look so good, you look so good," there's almost an element of, "Well, you say this all the time, I'm kinda used to it."
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that as well, when that kind of gets taken away, if you're, like you say, if you're not doing so great and you stop replying to people and people are expecting of you to gas them up a little bit and that's not there, sometimes that can cause issues within itself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there is a in content. It's everyone is so quick to like, oh, you're smashing it, you're smashing it, you're smashing it, you're
Yeah.
smashing it. But if I've been holding one viewer for the last 6 months, am I smashing it? Like,
Mhm.
not saying that's like the goal, but like you say, ultimately the
Yeah.
goal is growth. You want to grow, you want to
Yeah.
progress, and you want to improve whatever it is that you're focusing your time on. You want to get better. So I think it's hard giving constructive criticism. It is
It
very
is.
hard.
Especially to the people that we really adore.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's hard.
I'm super empathetic as well. So I'm like, if I say this, is this going to upset them? Is this going to cause them
Mhm.
to spiral? Are they going to go inside their shell? Like, how are they going to respond to it? Whereas it's easy to just say, "You're doing great."
Yeah.
Like, that's easy.
Yeah. And it kind of brings it back to when you're kind of asked how you are. If people say to you, "Oh, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing fine, thanks." It's a very easy thing to answer,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying this needs to be done every single time someone asks you how you are, but being able to unpack that a little bit and saying, "Oh, I'm feeling good because this thing happened," or, "I'm feeling a little bit down today, the weather's not too great. I stubbed my toe this morning," and kind of bring in a little bit of kind of reasoning to those feelings. I feel like you can
Mhm.
process them a little bit better yourself. That's
Yeah.
at least been my experience.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's I am the worst person at follow my own advice in that, like, speak up, speak
Yeah,
to someone,
I'm the
and
same.
any time someone says, "How are you doing?" Fine. To be fair, my
Yeah,
actual response
exactly the
is,
same.
same shit, different day, or same shit, different
Mhm,
shovel. Like,
mhm,
that is literally my response.
mhm.
And it's like, then I walk off. I'm like, why did I fucking say that? Like, just,
Yeah,
I'm not having a good day. So why am I not telling this
yeah.
person? Like, I think it leads on to one. I had got a question written down here. It's like, why do you think men bottle things up so much in like say this? I feel it goes for both, like for all genders it is, but I feel for
Mhm.
men it's very common for men to just like, yeah, I'm all good, cracking on.
Yeah,
Like,
and I think that's something we've been really conditioned to do. I think that men often get a lot of praise when they just get on with their task at hand. Kind of like we mentioned before, they're providers and protectors. The tasks that men often do are either physical tasks, the likes of DIY around the house, mowing the lawn, or doing these kind of physical jobs at work. And that to us is success. That to us is giving us a job and a reason and a thing to do.
mhm,
Whereas I feel like from the women's side of things, and obviously I can only speak on my experience, is the women have a lot more compassionate roles. They often do a lot more of
yeah,
the care around things, and oftentimes caring for things, whether that be other human beings, whether that be household chores, pets, or working as a nurse, or whatever it may be. There's a lot more empathy in that, and I feel
mhm,
like the things like talking about your feelings, they come across a lot better in those situations. I feel
yeah,
like if and obviously there are men that are nurses and women that are construction workers and stuff like that, but I'm obviously using a very broad brush here.
Yeah.
But I think that having that time to be able to say, you know, I'm not doing great, but I can still do what I need to do is something that needs to kind of really be checked in on, because
Yeah.
it's it's very, very easy to have this mask of I'm doing fine, because if I'm not doing fine, my content sucks. Or if I'm not doing fine, I seem less capable at the thing that I normally do. And I think as men, it's not necessarily a case of bottling up. It's more about putting that mask on. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
telephone voice or a performative piece. Is we just put this thing on that everything's rosy and dandy because that's what people want to see. That's what people want to see on social media sites and on the videos that we make. You know, people aren't going to watch a video if you're all sad and grumpy all the time,
Yeah.
but we get sad and grumpy all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's hard because it is. You're right. No one wants to see. Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Like
yeah,
people, like say,
exactly.
you want radio, like you want to put on a mask, and it's
Hmm.
so easily done. I think even outside of content, I think men have kind of going back to that the conditioning have kind of been conditioned to see vulnerability as weakness,
Yeah,
whereas
absolutely.
for women, like you said, they are natural givers, natural like empaths and carers,
Hmm.
and like I say, they're way more prominent in nursing and teaching and all all the roles of society that include emotion.
Yeah,
And it's why I think women are a lot more emotionally intelligent than men are for the most part.
yeah.
So like I said, using a broad brush, not for everyone. That I've always found it interesting how I don't know. I don't really know how to explain my thought process. I kind of just went, but I just yeah. I think it's interesting how I would like to see more crossover. You know, of like
Yeah,
I don't, yeah,
absolutely. And I think we're starting to
my
see that a
brain.
little bit more in today's society, which is a good thing.
Mm, yeah.
But I definitely want to see more of an active role in kind of schools and things like that that say that this is okay, this is not okay, and kind of teaching people from a younger age to be a little bit more in tune with their emotions. I think that, to use a very traditional lens here, the boys always went out and did football and sports, and their value
Yeah.
was based on their physical attributes and what they could achieve, what their personal bests were, how good they were in a sport in a physical sense. And if they were to break a bone, for example, and they'd be out of the game, that lessens their value.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the same with mental health, is that if the mental health is poor, you know, we can use the term kind of like a broken brain here to kind of bring that in line with a broken leg or a broken arm,
Mhm.
is it diminishes your value. It feels like it diminishes your value directly. Whereas in kind of the more traditional women's kind of roles, is it's much more collaborative about talking through things and kind of giving your knowledge and experience to other people and kind of bringing those up kind of in teacher roles and nursing roles and those more kind of caregiver roles. And it's not seen as the same vulnerability because it doesn't diminish what they can provide as human beings.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really, really important thing to kind of take note of.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% agree. I feel like it probably starts from quite a young age. Of I always remember being at school and, like I said, the guys would be sitting there messing around, digging each other in the arm, and like just kind of like that masculine bravado kind of
Yeah.
thing. Whereas the girls would be talking. I feel
Hmm.
like women would, or like schoolgirls, like when I'm being at school, would talk more, and they would, like you said, they're
Yep.
more in tune to have these conversations of like, I'm feeling this way. Whereas for guys,
Yeah.
it's like, dead arm, like, do you know what I mean? Like, and then so then when you get older, it comes to like we don't have that experience. Like we don't
No,
have
I
that,
agree.
like, especially maybe if you come from a household where you grew up with like a bunch of sisters, or like say, I'm not sure how it was for you, but if you're in a more female
Hmm.
dominated family, you might you would learn that kind of thing. Like I have friends that grew up with like 3 or 4 sisters, and then they're very in tune to their emotions and communication and how to process and regulate.
Yeah,
Whereas if you come from like 3 brothers, you're all just a bit like,
yeah. And I think a lot of that derives from there's always, and especially in the male friend groups that I have, there always feels to be an element of competition. It
right.
always feels like, and the way that I've always come across it is everything feels like a dick swinging competition. It's who can be it's who can be the most bravado, it's who can drink the most beer, it's who can,
Yeah.
you know, get the highest score on this, or who can, do that type of stuff. And whenever it becomes a competition, that's when weakness comes into play. That's where vulnerabilities come into play,
Yeah.
because it's much more directly impacting your social status. It's much more directly impacting your value to a conversation and to what you can provide as a human being. And that's something that ultimately needs to change.
Yeah. I do wonder if that is just ingrained in us as human beings. Going like, if you go way back to like Neanderthals, it was
Yeah.
the strongest, the bravest, the toughest men would get the woman. They would get
Go hunt.
build a
Yeah.
family, and then,
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
say,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
would eat good food and you would
Mm-hmm.
be more prosperous. Whereas, obviously, if you weren't as strong, and I couldn't hunt and I couldn't forage, or like and it was an actual physical weakness, then you
Yeah.
suffered because of it. And I wonder if that is just like chemically just ingrained in
Mm-hmm.
us as men
Yeah.
to
I,
to
I
to
think it
crave that
is.
competition and that.
I think it is. And I think a lot of that boils down to kind of a point I mentioned earlier about having a project in hand, having a reason to be doing something, having a
Yeah.
reason. The amount of times that I've heard people say, that come to me with, I don't feel like I'm useful. I feel useless inside. Um, it's about, I feel like men need a purpose and a
Yeah.
reason to be doing something. And I think that once people find their reason and find their purpose, that's what brings them a lot of joy and comfort. Whereas I feel like women don't need the same, at least from my experience, that women don't need the same purpose. Just to be doing what they're doing is enough.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like for myself, and kind of ties into the competitive element of it, we all need that overarching goal. And so many times we compare each other to one another, and seeing that someone else is hitting their goal faster than I am, well, I've got to keep up to that pace,
Hmm.
or I don't feel as useful because I'm comparing myself to other people. And a lot of that is to do with social media. It's
Yeah.
very easy to see the highlights of everybody's lives and the numbers that they're hitting and the followers that they're getting and the holidays that they go on and the experiences that they have. And because I'm not having those, my use feels less.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that is the toxic side of social media, is that I find it, I always use it as like a this metaphor of, I'm watching people win a race that I'm not even competing in. Like, do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like this person, like say, they've got this lavish lifestyle, this holiday and all this, and it's like, I'm not even I'm not I'm not in the same sport. This is me over here. Like
Yeah.
whatever they're doing does not matter to me at all. And it's
Mhm.
like, as I've got older, like I've learned that just I'm running my own race, and the only
Yeah.
competition I have is me from yesterday.
Yeah. I agree totally with that.
Yeah, it's and it's what they say is, what's the saying? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yep. That's the one.
Yeah, and I think
It's
that
it's so true.
I don't think there's a truer state when it comes to social media and content
No.
creation. That is just
I
is
agree. I agree. And I think a lot of issues can arise when people begin to attach themselves and their worth to their numbers.
Yeah.
There's a content creator that I know. I won't name him for the sake of this, but he's a rather large content creator. But because he's a large content creator, he doesn't get approached by people because he feels like he's out of reach.
Ah,
And it's a
interesting.
really interesting dynamic that I found
Yeah.
because I treat everybody exactly the same. And in these kind of situations where, let's say you're at a convention and everyone's kind of getting together and meeting up, because this person has a more of a presence and they'll be too popular for us. They'll be too
Yeah.
busy to attend this and too high profile to do that. All some people want sometimes is just to sit down, a chat,
Yeah.
a drink, a coffee, a beer every now and again, or go over for some food. That's all we all want. We just want social interaction.
Yeah. And just because they've got a higher presence on social media than you doesn't mean they have any more value than you as a human
Mm-hmm.
being.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Absolutely.
one of the most genuine, incredible conversations I had at like these events at Format. I met him multiple times. Fuck it, I'll name him. I don't know if you know the streamer Stallion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him a couple of years ago at Format. He's got massive presence online, and you think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's doing really well, and maybe quote unquote out of reach. Just
Mm-hmm.
we just started bumped into each other and started chatting on Format, like introduced myself, and then one of the most genuine conversations and nights. Ended up fucking partying with him till like 3-4 in the morning to like a drum and bass rave and like an NQ64 or whatever the place was.
Yeah.
But again, like he was just a genuine dude, a normal guy.
Yeah.
Didn't have any. Not once did he mention, "Oh, I've got 300,000 followers," or like whatever. I
Yeah.
wasn't like, there was never any kind of looked down upon because I'm
Yeah.
a small creator. It was just, like I say, a human interaction. And
Yeah. And I think a lot of people need to remember that even though we have such online presences, we're all human beings.
yeah,
We all have the same emotions, we all have the same stories to tell, and everybody has their own unique spin on things. And there's something quite magical in that that gets almost lost in translation when it comes online, because there is this element of whoever's popular at the moment has the gospel and whatever they say is
yeah,
true because they've got such a following, it must be true. And there's a lot of misinformation that can go around as well.
definitely. Definitely. I think they always say like Twitch is like is like a revolving door, isn't it? Like you said, people are bombing like in your streams every day, but you stop streaming,
Yeah.
there's gonna be another streamer, there's gonna be another
Yeah.
community. And I think the sooner you can learn to accept that that's okay. That is
Oh,
okay. Like
absolutely.
people don't owe their loyalty to you
No.
to your stream. It's just people
Yeah.
want to live
No,
their life.
absolutely I agree with that. And I think that you have to look at what people want out of what they're consuming as well. I
Mm,
know a lot of content creators who are much less energetic than me, and some people need that to just say, you know what, I'm having a relaxing night today.
yeah.
And it's something that we do a lot in our community as well. It's very ironic that we're recording on a Wednesday actually, because we have Wellbeing Wednesdays,
Oh, no way.
which is something that we do in our community where, I
Wicked.
don't go live, and we have channels dedicated to posting about if you went to the gym today, if you went walking today, or if you're celebrating any little wins and that type of thing.
Hmm.
Because I think it's really important to do those types of things because it makes us feel more human.
Yeah.
And especially with the rise of things like AI and a lot of the more generative stuff, there often is that human touch that is lacking a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It's so, like you said, it's so easy to forget that the creator is a human, like you said earlier, and
Yeah.
having something like that where you can just reconnect and like you say, humanize the person. That you're not just a face on a TV screen. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess it's the same for like when you think like football players as well, and like
Hmm.
sports and athletes of like, oh, they're just people we see on a screen, but when you hurl abuse at them on Twitter or in the stadiums or go to their homes, like this
Oh,
is a human
absolutely.
being. Like at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah. And football's a really good example of that. So one of the part-time jobs I had during high school was working at a football stadium. So I
Oh,
did like
nice.
the shirt sales and stuff like that, and we would often have days where they would come in for book signings. Some of the older players. It was at Leeds, where obviously I'm from Yorkshire,
Hmm.
and I remember a very vivid conversation I had with Vinnie Jones, who was
Oh, no
obviously an
way.
ex-Leeds player,
Yeah.
and we just sat and had a chat, and it was so down to earth because for me that's where it stemmed that these people are just people. They just live a different life
Yeah.
and the things that come with that. But at the end of the day, all they want is to wind down on the weekend, feel like they have a purpose,
Hmm.
and share their good parts and their bad parts, and that's the case across the board.
Yeah. I think there's, especially for, like I say, for football players, like it's a really interesting conversation that I feel like a lot of people maybe think they couldn't even have with someone
Yeah,
that's quote unquote, again, going back, it's the same like with streamers or football players, like, oh, I can't approach them. But like, if you do, you just have genuine conversation.
yeah,
And I think it, like you say, they are footballers second, your streamers second, you're a human first. And
yeah. Oh,
like
absolutely,
I say, all we want
absolutely.
is
And I think,
connection.
and I think a lot of times as well is some people can kind of over fantasize that a little bit. I know a few
Yeah.
examples where friends have gone to meet people that they absolutely idolize and they just haven't clicked with them.
Hmm.
But that happens all the time if you get a new person that joins your company at work and you just don't get along with them. Like
Yeah.
that's part of being human.
Yeah. You can't connect with everyone. You can't have
Yeah.
everything in common with
Yeah.
everyone.
And also to kind of flip that on its head a little bit, you will also find the greatest connections with the most random people that you'll meet.
Yeah.
And there's something kind of magical about that.
Oh, I love that. You ever had like one of those kind of interactions with like someone on the street or like, just a stranger?
Yeah, there's actually one that springs to mind really well. Was it was whilst I was on holiday. I went on holiday with my parents. I was probably about 15, 16 at the time. And it was kind of like a big complex building. So you kind of got an apartment on a big complex. Obviously had its own pool and stuff with the sunbeds and all that type of stuff. And every single time us and a random family would be like right next to each other on the sunbeds. And I remember one time there was another guy who, very much like me, was very ginger and just wanted to stay in the shade and play on his Game Boy or whatever it was.
Nice.
And having that shared kind of introvertedness
Yeah.
kind of brought each other out of our shells a little bit. And because of that, we had someone to mate around with and go to like walk down to like the ice cream shop or whatever it may be, because you already have that shared connection.
Yeah.
And me and him talked for very many years afterwards.
That's awesome.
And it's having that friendship there that it really comes down to how you communicate, I feel like, and
Yeah.
being once again kind of bringing it back to that, be the first one to communicate. If you're opening that branch and opening that door to say, oh hey, I see that we've got this in common,
Hmm.
let's let's have a discussion around it, let's be friends, let's do this, let's do that. I think it's something that a lot more people need to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because again, I can't remember what we were talking about. We mentioned earlier that if you don't try, you'll never know. And it's like if you
Yeah,
never, like I said, if you never reached out to the kid with the Game Boy that was similar to yours or whatever, like you would never have had these years of incredible friendship. You wouldn't have these
yeah,
memories of going to the ice cream shop. And like these are all what make us human at the end of the day is
I agree. Yeah,
these little snippets that just piece together your history and your life and like who you are. Like I I'm very guilty of over romanticizing life. I,
yeah,
I I look at it a lot as like a film. Like when I
uh-huh.
think back to like my past experiences in history, I'm picturing this big old like film projector with like film rolling and it's like the noise of the clicking and then like I'm seeing like
Yeah,
I'm watching my life and it's moments like that, it's those connections that I think are, like you said, they're just the absolute pearls of life.
Oh, I agree 100%. I have a little bit of a differing view to it, but kind of similar is I often view things a lot with curiosity and wonder and the way I always describe it to people is when you're a toddler, when you haven't fully developed social skills, they are the most confident people on the planet.
Yeah,
if
it's so true.
if you take their actions and kind of separate them from the fact that they're just a child, they're some of the most confident people on the planet
Yeah.
because they'll walk past someone, whether they're, regardless of their age, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexuality or race or ability, they'll give them a little wave and say hi. They don't mind. And
Yeah.
there's something so wondrous about that where I feel like I want to portray a bit of that in everything that I do because just having a little bit of curiosity and a little bit of, oh, let's see what's around here, or oh,
Yeah.
let's connect in this way. It brings, like you say, some of the real pearls of life come from those situations.
Yeah, it really, curiosity just sparks wonder.
Yes,
Like, I
it
think that
really
is
does.
just, yeah, I think curiosity, I think, is such an underappreciated trait to have.
Yes, I agree massively. And it's something that's also very easy to develop.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be curious about things because, and it kind of devolves back to that more traditional type of roles that we were talking about, is human beings, in my opinion, are naturally curious.
Yeah.
They want to know things, they want to learn, they want to grow and evolve. So why kind of inhibit yourselves from those,
Yeah.
And that's something I found a lot from dealing with kind of anxiety at the time, was this idea that my anxiety or depression, or whether it's kind of taking the other side of that, over the over hyperactivity of things like ADHD, or maybe not getting the same social cues as maybe someone who's autistic, it's still having that element of wonder in there that says, I do want to do this.
Yeah.
It's just my brain won't let me.
Yeah, that is the thing of not being. I've always, I actually put a tweet out yesterday saying it's crazy what I believe I could achieve if I just stepped out my own
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. At the moment, I'm doing a little bit of a job hunt at the moment. I'm not like getting made redundant or anything. I just feel like I can do a little bit better in my job. I got denied a promotion at work, and instead of channeling that into anger and resentment, there's an element of curiosity now of, I wonder what else is out there. And I also put out a tweet earlier today that said the amount of jobs that I've seen that I feel like I could do. And
Yeah.
there's another really good analogy of like the whole like men thinking they can fly a plane. Have you heard of that one before?
No, what's that?
So it's essentially where if you were on a plane and the pilot, let's say the pilot had like a heart attack or something and couldn't fly, no one could fly a plane, right? Do you think you could get behind the controls of a plane and successfully land it?
Oh God.
Because so many men feel like they can just do it.
That's ego. That's ego.
Yeah, it is.
Do you think you could?
Yeah, absolutely. I would back myself 100% to land a plane. But I know I would learn entirely on the job.
Yeah.
I would have absolutely zero idea of what I'm doing.
No.
But I reckon I could do it still.
See, I think that's it's a big keyboard. It's a big like layout of buttons that you got there.
Yeah, but so is my keyboard and Stream Deck and 2 monitors
True.
and controllers and all that type of stuff, So
yeah, you got to back yourself in whatever you do in life. You got to back yourself, and even if it's landing a plane.
Yeah, if you do not back yourself, then nobody else will. We can't, and it kind of ties back to what you were saying about taking a more individual approach. Is if you're not backing yourself, if you're not loving yourself, if you're not caring for yourself, if you're not motivating yourself, Nobody else is going to do that for you. You have to take the onerous and do things yourself before you can expect others to assist you with that.
A fucking men. That is so true. Like it is.
It's true.
And I think it comes with that ties into like accountability, and I think that's something I've learned over the last few years. Is I mean, I've always taken accountability for my actions, but
Yeah.
I've always thought of accountability as being a physical thing, like for something that I've physically done. But there's accountability within yourself to, okay, I'm holding myself accountable to work out today. I'm taking accountability
Yeah.
to make conversation with, like, to reach out to this person, or to, like, you know what I mean? Just in day-to-day
Yeah.
life, of taking accountability of my emotions, of like, oh, I'm feeling depressed. Well, I've eaten like shit today. I've not worked out. I haven't left the house. Like, no wonder I feel like shit. Like, I need to be accountable
Yeah.
in taking that walk and eating right and exercising, getting good
Yeah,
sleep.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think oftentimes we rely on other things to do that for us. You know, we rely on timers
Yeah.
and notifications and the amount of times we have accountability buddies that where we kind of keep each other accountable for stuff when really the person that should be keeping you accountable is you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, accountability buddies have always been a thing where I've never been one to go to the gym or anything by myself. Like, I'm very much of a solo exercise person. And
Yeah,
I think with the accountability buddy, what happens when that buddy's not going anymore? Then you really haven't
exactly.
built anything
We
in yourself.
Yeah, and I think that comes to a little bit of a topic around worth and value as well, is that if we're tying our accountability to other people and we don't feel like we can do things on our own, then that makes us feel that little bit less worthwhile because suddenly we can't do something because somebody else isn't doing it. You know,
Yeah.
it was something that I got a lot of when I did Sea of Thieves content, was because the smallest ship you can man on Sea of Thieves is a two-man ship. And the game became a lot more difficult when you were just one person.
Right.
And oftentimes there were times where I would say, no, if I don't have another person, then I won't just play it. And it's putting that accountability on somebody else or something else that oftentimes is out of our control.
Yeah.
We're letting things out of our control define what we want to do. And I think there's something quite profound in that.
100%. I think it is becoming more common for people to do things by themselves. I think at least when I was growing
Yeah.
up, if you were to go to the cinema by yourself, you're like, you're a fucking weirdo. Who's going to the cinema by
Yes.
themselves? Like, you know what I mean? But now it's like, you want to go see that movie? Go to the cinema. Like, you want to go to that
Yeah.
country and you've got no one to go with? Go do it. Like, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah,
and like,
absolutely.
there is like such a freedom in there, like you said.
Yeah, you're very quick to inhibit that wonder, that curiosity, just because you don't have somebody else to go with. There's a really, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there's a TikToker that I follow, and his whole content is around doing things on his own. He'll
Okay.
go out, he'll do meal reviews on his own, he'll go see films on his own, he'll go on holiday on his own, go shopping and things like that.
Yeah,
And he's kind of become known for that now.
that's cool.
And there's quite an irony to creating a community around doing things on your own. And I love it. I think it's such an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that kind of content fascinates me.
Yeah.
I also think it's a lovely content to have though, because it will encourage people to do it themselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't get me wrong,
Absolutely.
you'll get a few people that are like, maybe they won't do it by themselves, but they're getting that kick by watching someone else do it. But you will get a
Yeah.
handful that will go out and actually
Yeah,
take it on.
absolutely. And I think there's obviously there's a bit of a balance to be had there in if you do everything on your own, you are sometimes kind of denying that social communication aspect.
Yeah.
So there are some things that are better done with friends, but wait to kind of flip that on its head, waiting for friends to do something, you're denying
Yes.
yourself that opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if the opportunity arises to do something with a friend, like, don't say, "Oh, I'm going to do that by myself." Well, I mean, you can do if you want to. Like, you can
Yeah,
do
yeah.
whatever you want by yourself. But like you said, if you're going to deny yourself the opportunity for something just because no one is available, then that's where I think, yeah, you like I say, you're denying yourself memories, happiness.
Yeah.
You could have one of those pearls where you meet someone while you're there, and then you share that connection, like, and even if it's just a brief moment, you never see that person again, but you'll
Yeah.
hold on to that. I had it once when I was when Jaylee and I, my partner, were in a long distance relationship. She was living up in Norwich, near Norwich, Norfolk.
Hmm.
She was up in Norfolk, and I was
Yeah.
down in Essex. So it was like a 3-hour train journey. I remember once I was just on the train. I was nearly there. I was maybe like in Ipswich somewhere,
Hmm.
and this big, small but like wide, really stocky African lady comes on, bright, vibrant orange dress. I was like, that's sick. She comes on.
Yeah.
She got pretty much an empty train. I'm sat on the edge of my seat getting ready to get off, and she sits like the seats opposite me or like parallel to me. And she just looks at me and she goes, "What's your name?" Like, I'm not going to do an accent, so I really should not. I should not do an African accent.
I mean, it was pretty good. It was pretty good.
But then she asked me what my name is, and she reached out that branch, and I told her, and then she asked what I was doing, and no, I hadn't told her what I was doing, and she goes to me, "You're exactly where you're supposed to be."
Yeah.
And then she ended up asking me these questions. She's like, I can't. I wrote it down on my phone in my notes somewhere. But she started asking me these questions. She's like, "Oh, like the number 3 is quite like strong with you," and I was like, "That's my favorite number." Like, I was like, "That's really weird." And then she mentioned about like the number 7, and because I think my shirt or something had 7 on or whatever.
Yeah.
And she was explaining how 7 is like how this number has meaning to letting things go and starting a new chapter, which is basically what I was doing. I was in a new relationship,
Wow.
and I was
Yeah.
like basically reaffirming to me that going up to see this girl, that was like a new
Yeah.
thing for me, and it was like a new chapter in my life. I just got out of a really bad relationship like
Yeah.
6 months
Yeah.
prior, and it was like, fuck, like this woman has no idea who I
Yeah.
am. Like, we just, and this is one of those pearls I will just hold on to for the rest of my life. I don't know her name. It was, she said, call me Mama something. I've forgotten it now. Feel really bad, but she could call me Mama something.
That's fantastic.
And it was just, yeah, never saw that lady again. I've no, she was going to visit her grandchildren or something like that. And
Mhm.
we had this 15-20 minute conversation on a train in the middle of fucking Norfolk. And then that was it. Never saw her again. But, it's just, I've never actually told that story to anyone before, but it was just, it's such a,
it's such a good story to hear because it's such a prime example of being the person that reaches out that branch. And it's a really good example of just approaching things with curiosity rather than saying, "Oh, we're sat on a train, we don't know each other. We should really be talking to each other." And a lot of people, another thing that I've really found that kind of ties into this is whenever you get on a train or a bus, you always notice that people are sat as far apart from each other as they possibly can. Everyone's
yeah,
taking window seats. Nobody
yeah,
wants them to sit next to each other, and it kind of puts a little bit of a barrier towards that
definitely.
social connectivity. I remember as a child, my grandma was one that kind of was a third parent in our life. My mum and dad worked a lot of overtime, night shifts at a bar and that type of thing. And whenever I'd go anywhere with my grandma on the bus or whatever, we would talk to absolutely anybody on that bus. Whoever we
Yeah.
sat next to, we'd yap away and have a little conversation. We got to know a few people in the local area, and I feel like a part of that is just missing. It's just gone
Yeah.
because people have their connectivity online. They don't feel like they need that in a random public space.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lost, I don't want to say art, but it's something so beautiful in just that
Yeah.
random connection for the sake of connection. It's not, you're not looking for something out of anyone. You, like I said, and it goes back to the curiosity of just like, oh, like, love your bag. Where did you get that from? Like you say,
Yeah.
and things like that. Or like, I love your t-shirt. And I think I'm one. I can't remember the TikToker, or it's actually on Instagram Reels. I've been watching this guy
Mhm.
where it's all about rejection therapy. And
Oh, I think
like
I know who you're talking about.
it's like
Yeah.
the fear of rejection, where this guy's going out, and there's actually a couple of them. But one guy's doing something every day to cure his fear of rejection. And it's I think
Yeah.
the latest one was going into like a fish and chip shop asking to deep fry his fish for him, and and like it's just like random things like that, and going up to people and asking a stranger to open a pack of Pokemon cards with him, and
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah.
And then the other dude is just going up to people and just complimenting them, just saying, "Have a great
Yeah.
day. Have it like I love what you're wearing." Like, and I walk home from work most days, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to make it a crucial part of my day. Is on my walk home, I will compliment at least one person.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it because it kind of brings back to the point I mentioned about bridging the gap
Yeah,
between going from being one type of person and trying to gain this trait. You know, for a lot of people, it's things like social anxiety or an element of confidence, and going from not speaking to anyone in a public place to asking someone to open a pack of Pokemon cards is quite a big jump.
yeah,
But going from not speaking to anyone in a public place and just saying to someone, "Oh, I like your outfit today. I like how you've done your hair." It bridges that gap and makes that jump a little bit more manageable. And
yeah.
then suddenly going from complimenting someone to having a conversation with someone to
Hmm.
then opening a pack of Pokemon cards with
Yeah,
someone, it's a much more realistic step.
yeah. And I think that's kind of where I'm. Yeah, my own bridging gap is because the amount of times I walk past someone and I think something like that is so cool, or like, I really like that about
Yeah,
them, but I'd say nothing, and I'm like,
yeah,
but if you were to say that, that could make that person's entire day. They could be having
absolutely.
the worst day. Then because you mentioned something you liked about them, doesn't have to be appearance. Like I said, it could be anything. And like
Yeah,
and just like, oh, you're walking with some like confidence today. Like, do you know what I mean?
yeah,
It could be weird. Like, it doesn't have to be. Oh, you look beautiful. I love your eyes. It's just
yeah, yeah.
it can just be really, really the smallest thing, and it can really change someone's day.
Yeah, I remember on the flight to, I think it was a TwitchCon actually, and there was someone sat next to me on the plane who was playing a game on their Switch,
Hmm.
and I just simply said something like, "Oh, I love this game." Like I think it was Cuphead. They were
Right.
playing through Cuphead, and I was like, "Oh, I love this game. It's such a like nice art style or whatever." We ended up playing together. They said, "Oh, do you want a controller? Do you want to play?" Like,
No
and it
way.
sparks that opportunity because obviously you can do that with a Switch, but it being able to. That's not what I was looking for in the slightest. I
Hmm.
just wanted to make a conversation about Cuphead as a game,
Yeah,
and suddenly we're co-oping it and we're beating
that's
bosses and
sick.
stuff together
That's
and
so
having
cool.
such a memorable flight. It
Hmm.
was really, really nice.
Again, one of those pearls that you'll hold on
It
to.
is. It's and these kind of pearls are just you can't put a price on them.
No,
They're
no, you really can't. And I think it's so easy for us to look back on our life, and you look at all the monumental moments,
mhm.
the wedding day you're having your child. Obviously, I'm sure they're
Yeah.
the greatest days of your life. I'm sure they are. And it's like you think of all these massive, grandiose things, when really it's these little pearls that I personally think is just the magic of being a human.
Yeah. I feel like I feel like a good way of describing that is all these little pearls kind of shape you as a human being. It's kind of like adding bricks to a house, you know?
Hmm.
We all celebrate when the house is done, or we celebrate when an area is done, or if we've built a conservatory, yeah, we celebrate that, or one of the projects that we did over the COVID times when I moved back home with my parents, we built a mini pub in the back garden. And that
Nice.
was an amazing experience. We now have a little pub down there with a projector and like two beer pumps and stuff, and it's fantastic.
Wicked.
But every single time we did something there, we kind of celebrated it. We were
Hmm.
like, okay, we've cleared out the rubbish. This looks great. We've put the scaffold down. This looks great. We've
Hmm.
got a roof on it. This is great. We've, put some boards around, it's insulated now, and being able to celebrate those with the
Yeah.
little steps that you're taking gives you a better journey to the end goal. And I think
Yeah.
that that's what a lot of people kind of need to keep in the back of their minds, is that oftentimes, it's a little bit cliche, but it oftentimes is the journey rather than the end goal.
I was just about to
Everybody
say,
wants to, yeah, everybody wants to content create full time, or everybody wants to, be an entertaining person, or be a loving husband or wife, or have a child, that type of thing. But the journey of meeting someone and falling in love with them, the journey of creating your first piece of content that goes viral, the journey of collaborating with someone and having an amazing friendship out of it. Those are the wonders.
yeah.
Those are the ones that give you a little tingle inside when you haven't spoken in 3 weeks and then you actually do something together.
Yeah.
It really is nice.
Yeah, I think it really is like the secret to happiness is if the
Yeah.
quicker you learn that the end goal isn't what's going to bring you joy, it's learning to enjoy the process and the journey.
Yeah.
And like I said, they are the moments you hold on to. And like you don't get the happiness because I've got a bar in the back garden.
Yeah,
The happiness
exactly.
is from that time you spent with your family
Yeah.
constructing this thing together. Like that's
Yeah.
where the joy is coming from. I'm sure you
Yeah.
enjoy the beer as well, but
Well, yeah, of
yeah,
course, but also on that point is we now have a space to have people round, to have people come and visit, and
yeah,
have those joyous memories in a place that we've built.
hmm
So it's kind of a great experience to look on back on, but it's also a great experience moving forwards as well.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a really good analogy for life as well. I think is being able to enjoy your process, but also like say you're especially in content when you're creating these spaces for future memories and for future good moments and positivity and
Yeah.
love and just all the goodness we need.
Yeah, something that rings very true to me is there was a saying on one of the podcasts that I listened to around kind of like health and well-being, was that your mind often seeks reassurance around things. It often seeks answers and
Mhm.
excuses and reasons why. So if you're looking for a positive reason why something is good, you'll oftentimes find those.
Yeah.
If you're looking for reasons why things are negative, you'll oftentimes find the negative things.
Mhm.
There was a really good piece on it that said, if you look around your room at the moment, and I asked you to look for every single thing that was red, you'd see some red things, but you'd
Yeah.
also find some brown things that you'd kind of edge on the red side, or some burgundy things. You'd
Mhm.
make things look how you want it to look.
Yeah.
And there's something really quiet, and it kind of ties into that kind of like natural curiosity and wonder. It's
Yeah.
approaching things with an element of positivity can often get you so much out of it than
Mhm.
you expected it to. And
Yeah.
that's where those pearls come from.
Yeah, 100%. I think I saw that on I think it was on Theo Von podcast. I got a feeling.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That specific segment was, yeah.
Love that dude. Um but yeah, it is such a you can apply that to absolutely everything.
Yeah,
And it is
you
so
really can.
true. I think if you are constantly negative and down and feeling that life hates me and this sucks and this is awful, well, that's what you're gonna get.
Yeah. You're
And I
just
think,
going to find things that confirm that.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it's I always look at it as like conspiracy theories and things like that. People will always, I mean, the same applies for it's the same process for science as well. If you're
Yeah.
trying, you have this theory of something happening, you don't do everything to prove it right. The process of science is to do everything you can to disprove your theory,
Yeah.
and that's how you come to conclusions of what it is. And the
Yeah.
truth
Yeah.
is disproving, not reaffirming everything to back up your point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can do that with our emotions as well. And just if we're having a bad day and we consistently think we're having a bad day, or we're trying to prove that we're having a bad day,
Yeah.
oftentimes that can make things worse than they are. I I suffered a lot with kind of a self-sabotage element where I would purposefully I would purposefully stay in bed so that I was rushing around in the morning, or I would purposefully not shower so I didn't come across as well presented at an interview or something like that. And that to me was this idea of reason of I don't think I'm good enough for this. So
Interesting.
I'm going to find something that approves that.
Hmm.
And kind of that within itself is probably something that some people have experienced before with, oh, I'm an anxious person, so I don't go outside and do things, or
Yeah.
I'm ADHD, so I have to approach everything at a million miles an hour, or
Hmm.
I have to give myself distractions because that's how I work, or those types of things. And oftentimes they're not beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, you're the only one that's actually missing out, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's so true. I think people can be so quick to, like you say, just soak and bask in whatever it is
Yes.
that they've got going on, and it's just that famous. I'm really bad at quoting things, but it's like, did you have a bad day, or did you just have a bad 5 minutes that you let
Sit. Yeah.
set and get worse, and then you just soaked in it, and it just
Yeah.
you turned it into a bad day. You had a bad 5 minutes, but you were the one that made it a bad day by stewing on it and sitting with it. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times it kind of boils down to the whole idea of having a bad day. It's
mhm,
completely fine to have a bad day,
yeah,
but it's how you act within that bad day that ultimately can turn that bad day into a bad 5 minutes, or it could turn it into a bad week. If you say to yourself, I'm having a bad day, and then spend 11 hours in bed doom scrolling on your phone, you're making that day a bad day. But if you have a bad day because of whatever reason it may be, let's say I always have cereal on a morning. If I've run out of milk, I'm like, oh, I can't have cereal this morning. So because I haven't had breakfast, I'm more cranky. And then the coffee that I have affects me twice as much. And then I'm all over the place.
yeah,
Instead of just saying to myself, why don't I just have toast instead? Why don't I do something else?
yeah.
It sets yourself up a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, and that really is this the whole setup
Yeah.
for your day, and it can turn into a week, and that's when, if you're not setting yourself up, that's when it does turn into a week, a month, and
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
next thing you know, you've just stewed in your own misery for 6 months,
Yeah.
and you've made zero growth, zero progression,
Hmm.
zero, and you just that's where
Yeah.
depression can really just stranglehold you, and
Oh, absolutely. And it's about knowing when that's coming into play. I
yeah,
feel like there is a time where I felt, and this was kind of at the earlier stages of kind of my depression diagnosis, was there was times when I felt genuine sadness from when something bad had happened. But then there were also times where I felt an artificial sadness,
okay,
where it was almost like a hollow sensation, or it felt like sadness, but for no reason.
yeah,
And in those types of situations where it's very easy to just kind of let that take a hold, like you say, turn a day into a few days into a week into a couple of weeks, and so on. That's when the turning point was for me, because I realized that this isn't genuine. This is an artificial sadness that I'm feeling.
yeah,
And those are the kind of moments where you can combat and really come back to yourself while still having those genuinely sad moments.
yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think for me, mine is it's really interesting. You say that you have like this artificial sadness, and I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
makes I've never heard of that term before. But yeah,
Yeah, I think it's something that I used, to kind of to give a little bit of explanation as to how, I was diagnosed with, depression, anxiety. So, one of those pearls of wisdom that we spoke about earlier was I met a friend who at a bar, he was interested in one of my friends, she wasn't interested in him, but he wanted to just he kind of lost his friends and he kind of wanted to have just a little bit of a boogie. It was in a bar we always go to. And growing up, about 18, 19 in our area, there wasn't very many places to go to. So we bumped into him all the time. And every single time it was like, hey, how's it going? And we'd have a catch up on life. Me and him became really good friends. And we used to go around to each other's houses and have pre-drinks together and meet up at this specific spot. And we'd message each other when we're out, like, oh, you out tonight, kind of thing. And we actually became good friends. And unfortunately, he took his own life when I was 20 years old. He took his own life, and I went to his funeral. I didn't know anybody there, and at that time, at that funeral, I found out that his mum was a motivational speaker for a living, and she stood up at her own son's funeral and spoke about the impact of talking to each other and men's mental health and things like that. And that had such an impact on me, an incredible impact. Now, at the time, the reason why I went onto medication was because things like talking therapies didn't help. It was a genuine sadness that I had at that time. But when I let that genuine sadness fade, as does with everything with grief, things get better and easier to manage over time. That genuine sadness turned into an artificial sadness. It was a hollowness. It was a void almost that said, you aren't deserving of happiness, because it just feeds into this void. It feeds into this sadness that really should be something of a memory, something of a treasure of this person's life. And I did a lot of work for the foundation that they set up regarding men's mental health. His name is James Burke. The James Burke Foundation does a lot of work around that stuff, especially in schools and talking to young people about mental health. And that was where the focus should have been. And that's where the positive change should have happened. And the hindsight of having that medication was that realization. It was the realization that this is where our energy should go. This is where we should make the change, not sat inside and scrunching that up and bottling it up and kind of bring that same sadness and carrying it along with us in more of an artificial sense. So I always make a huge effort to check in with the people that I feel like need checking in on, but at the same time, checking in the people that don't feel like they need to be checked in on. Because there are so many examples, celebrities and such. I could name a few off the top of my head where they looked like the happiest they could be, and yet they still were so down and felt so alone that they feel the need to take their own lives.
It's such a sad reality. I mean, on a few episodes ago, on one of my good friends, Dan Halsey, he said a really powerful quote of check in on your happy friends.
Absolutely.
Because, like you say, whenever someone mentions like celebrity like suicide, the first one that always pops into my head is Robin Williams.
Yeah.
The happiest, funniest guy I've ever known, and spent his entire life making other people happy because ultimately he didn't want others to feel the way he feels inside, and no one knew. And that really is like the power of conversation. But
absolutely,
especially for men who find it hard to talk, but for everyone, just talking and having that conversation, and like you said, reaching that hand out, going back might not be just for an incredible memory you create, but it could help someone. It could save someone's life.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree totally. I think a really good example of it is where, at the time, and kind of what spurred me to go to look into professional help, was I was in my standard job doing exactly what I normally do on a regular Tuesday, and I was a little bit off it on the day. My line manager came up to me and said, "Oh, are you doing all right?" I said, "Yeah, fine." And then she followed that up with, "Are you sure?" And kind of challenged it. And as soon as she said, "Are you sure?" within 15 seconds, I was crying.
Yeah.
Because that actual emotion had come out, that mask had kind of slipped off. And sometimes it does take the asking of, are you sure? Do you
Yeah.
really feel okay? Do you really? Because I think that once you ask that question a second time or kind of try to affirm that,
Yeah.
that's when a lot of the raw emotion can really come out and people can feel like they can connect on a little bit of a deeper level.
Yeah. I think it's maybe a subconscious thing of like you almost when you're asking that second time or you're asking, are you sure? Like really, it's you're almost they're seeing through your mask or like
Yes.
potentially seeing through the mask. So then you kind of know like, oh, the gig's up. Like you
Yeah.
gotta. I think that's I want like say, are you sure? It really is such a powerful way of asking. I mean, when I check in with people, I always say like, how are you? Like really? Like how are you
Yeah.
really feeling? How are you really doing? I think you again, like you said, it just sometimes that's all it takes is just that extra for it all to come out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And sometimes it can come in the weirdest of places. It can come in the strangest of moments, but that's the point where I feel like men specifically are really bad at,
Yeah.
because we're fine bottling things up, we're fine masking things and fine putting on a face. But then as soon as that probe goes any deeper than the mask is allowing, oftentimes you get an overflow of emotion because we've never been treated in that way before.
No, and it is again. We mentioned earlier about the childhood of coming up and
Absolutely,
men
yeah.
struggling to talk, but it's mind blowing to me that like 3/4 of like all suicides is men,
Yeah.
and it's I can't remember, I think it was like 30% of men or something like 29% of men I think it was are actually too embarrassed to talk about it.
Yeah. No, I can absolutely believe it. And the stat that really points out to me is the leading cause of death for men aged, I think it's something like 18 to 25,
Yeah,
is suicide.
yeah. Same with 40 to 49 as well.
Yeah, yeah. And to have our own destruction as the leading cause of death
Yeah,
is it's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy to me.
yeah. It should never be that. Should never be that
No,
high.
not
I
at
think
all.
it circles back to conversation and the power of
Hmm.
conversation and just making it less taboo to have these conversations that yeah, I'm a guy. I can like football, I can like manly things, I can do DIY, but I can also cry and I can also
Yeah,
be vulnerable.
yeah,
Vulnerable isn't a
absolutely.
weakness. It's
Yeah.
real.
And I think there needs to be an element of maturity when that happens in a friend group. Is I know that for a lot of myself and a lot of my community, our way of showing affection is just by gently bullying each other. You know, we
Yeah.
we throw punches at each other, we throw quips and jokes and all that type of
It's a
stuff.
British thing.
Often, yeah, it is a very British thing, but being able to see past that and once again, I mean, the podcast is called Beyond the Banter. It's a perfect
Yeah.
analogy for it. Is being able to see past that and saying, you know what, okay, we've maybe stepped a line here,
Mhm.
because that competitive nature, especially in men, where
Yeah.
it's just who can one up and one up and one up, then somebody takes that step across the line because they're so fueled by testosterone and this and that,
Yeah.
and that's when it gets a step too far. And it's an I don't want to say it's inevitable that that's going to happen, because I don't want to use that kind of term, but
Mhm.
it's commonplace that that happens. It's
Yeah.
commonplace that things overstep the line, and it's about saying this isn't right, this isn't good, and drawing a line under it, moving on and growing as people, rather than letting that really fester and boil up and get to these kind of situations.
Yeah, 100%. I think it is just having that level of maturity to be like, went too far. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah,
let's move past this. And
yeah,
it's natural for friendships even in family and relationships and anyone you deal with in life, to overstep, like you say, it does happen, and it's
Of
human
course.
nature, because
Yeah.
we're constantly trying to keep that balance, especially like when you're having the banter and when you build up
Mhm.
more of a rapport with someone, oh, with this person I can go to here, but with this person I can go like slightly further. And it is just
Oh, absolutely,
every
yeah.
relationship is different. And I've never liked the term where where someone's like, oh, well, that's their fault, they're feeling that way. It's just who I am. It's just how I am. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, no, you need that accountability and that emotional intelligence to know that, yeah, that's who you are, but also this is who this person is, and they don't respond
Mhm.
well to that behavior. So it's not out of the realms of your possibility to slightly adjust yourself to accommodate.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes it's down to how intense we are. The people that tend to be like that tend to be quite intense people,
Mm,
and for them to see a boundary or for them to have a boundary drawn on them feels like they're kind of being caged a little bit.
yeah.
And obviously that's not a nice feeling, but that's where that feeling needs to be discussed instead of dismissed. And this
Yes.
was something that we mentioned earlier as well, is discussing, I don't feel comfortable having a boundary on this. And the other person being firm on their boundary or saying, look, let's only talk about these certain topics, on every occasion, or, let's just say like this specific topic is off limits. Doing it in that kind of way where they can be tense about things that are a little bit more lighthearted, like
Hmm.
football teams are a good example of that,
Yeah.
where rivalries come into play and everybody gets a little bit gets a little bit jip about it, but then someone will bring in a previous relationship or someone will bring in something really, really toxic that changes the angle of it.
Yeah.
That's where we need to kind of be taking a little bit of a focus and drawing the boundaries around what's really important. And not to say that any boundary is or isn't important, but managing it from both sides
Yeah.
rather than just one sided.
Yeah. 100%. And I think it is just like we said earlier. It's a natural thing for boundaries to get crossed. It's gonna happen where, okay, like you hold your hands up. I fucked up. I apologize. Like, and it's when
Yeah,
someone
absolutely.
constantly is like over and over, repeatedly pushing your boundaries or going past it. That's
Hmm.
when you go, okay, well, you're clearly not respecting me,
Yeah.
because we can all make mistakes. We're all gonna fuck up, but it's
Yeah.
how we
Oh, for
learn and
sure.
grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the people that don't respect those boundaries, once again, it ties back to what are people really your friends for sometimes.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I've had a few friends where we would bully each other all the time through this kind of banter, but they weren't interested when I set a boundary.
Hmm.
And in that case, that's where the ulterior motive comes in of they're friending me because they have someone to belittle on or someone to vent to or someone to channel that rage to. And that's where that's not okay, because then it becomes an imbalance
Yeah.
and people need to be aware of that, because that has some lasting effects a lot of times.
Yeah. 100%. I think I couldn't agree more. I think having those boundaries for, like, respecting those boundaries for other people is so important. But at the same time, I think what maybe is even harder is respecting the boundaries that you put up for yourself,
Yeah,
and not
absolutely.
letting people encroach on your boundaries. And that's something I've always struggled with, is kind of having
Hmm.
that self-respect of like, actually, no, I'm not
Hmm.
okay with that. And I think
Yeah,
it's sorry, go on.
and I no, no, I was going to say that I think it's a really good point. In It ties back to this self-worth idea. It ties back to this self-confidence of saying,
Mm,
these are my boundaries, and if you overstep them, that's okay. We can learn from that. But if you don't have the confidence to stand up for yourself or don't have the confidence to say, well, this is not okay, then a really good analogy of it is kind of like you become a carpet almost for it. You become something that people can just tread on repeatedly and repeatedly. And once they know that that's okay, if you're not affirming in that boundary, it signals to them that it's okay to do it again.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's not how we feel. That's not how the case is. And just nipping it in the bud straight away often is a really good way of doing things. One of the content creators that I've very recently connected with. So one of the things I do is I call people stinky all the time. Like, it's just a thing. I'm like, oh, it's Stinky, how's it going? Like, kind of thing. I call everybody stinky. It's just playful. Kind of a thing. And yeah, it's a little playful thing. And I said this to someone as I entered their stream, and I said, oh, hi, Stinky, how you doing? And they said, oh, just to let you know, I kind of don't really like being called this. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. That's cool. I still want to know how your day went. I still want to know how everything's going, but I can change my communication going forward.
Yeah.
And that's obviously a good learning curve for me. And it shows that they're solid in their boundaries and their approach.
Yeah.
It doesn't dissuade the fact I want to be friends with them. It doesn't suddenly ruin everything because they've not liked the way I've communicated.
Yeah.
And this was in maybe our second interaction with each other, third interaction with each other.
Right.
Still very fresh. We're still very new and learning from each other. But having that in place is really important because it protects your peace and it lets others know that that's not the way to communicate with me. And that's completely fine. You know, these are just playful words that I use. And that's that.
Yeah, and I think it's having the level of maturity from yourself to like, oh, okay, like taking that on board and acknowledging.
Absolutely.
If someone hasn't got that maturity to like acknowledge that and change their actions because of then they're not meant to be around you. Like they're not.
I agree.
It's not their space.
I agree with that entirely.
But dude, we've gone over 2 hours. I think this is the first podcast I've gone over 2 hours.
I feel like we've been doing this about 10 minutes.
I know, right? It happens every time. I look down, I'm like, oh, fuck, like it feels like it could just go on forever. Like, but we should probably wrap things up because I'm also absolutely sweating balls in this room. But man, this has been such an incredible conversation. I really do appreciate you, man. It's been
and I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity as well. I think that being able to get onto a podcast like this that really has the focus on well-being and on improving people's well-being and how they act around others, it's so needed in this space.
Yeah.
So thank you for making this space. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, man. I mean, I'm sure we'll definitely have you back on. I mean, I feel like again we could have chatted for another 2 hours easily. I feel like there's
easily so
much more to unpack. But before we go, I need to ask if you could leave one message to the world. It could be a quote, an advice, anything that you kind of follow your life by. What would it be?
It's something that I actually have tattooed on my wrist. You can't see it very well here. The quote says, "Change nothing and nothing changes."
Ooh.
If you feel like you need to make change, make the change. Because the longer you sit doing nothing, nothing changes.
Yeah, that is it's incredible. Like it's such a simple message, but it is very, very important. It goes so deep. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason you got it tattooed on you. Man, that's a brilliant way to wrap things up. Tommy, thank you so much. You're doing incredible work. Where can people find you as well? Twitch, Twitter, and all that jazz.
People can find me on most platforms. My handle is Tommy Beans with an underscore. I do want to get rid of that underscore at some point, but you'll find me live mostly on Twitch. I go live 3 times a week. The days change depending on how my work schedule is, but 3 times a week from 6:30 p.m. UK time. I also post every single day at 4 p.m. on both YouTube and TikTok. And of course, my Twitter handle is exactly the same at TommyBeans_, where I post about absolutely anything that comes into my brain.
Yeah, there is some stuff on there. That's all I'll say.
Oh yeah, there's some stuff.
There's some stuff on there. Oh, fuck yeah. Tommy, thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate
No,
you, man.
thank
Thanks
you.
for
It's
taking
been
the
a
time.
pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.